martial arts, explosives, weapons and tactics.
I also cook.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 1992 Steven Seagal classic Under Siege. The film is directed by Andrew Davis and it stars, of course, Steven Seagal as Casey Ryback. We have Tommy Lee Jones, Gary Busey and Erika Eleniak. Now, the film follows Steven Seagal's character, Casey Ryback, who is serving on the USS Missouri, I believe it's called, as a cook. He's an ex-Navy SEAL who basically has been busted right down to the chef for insubordination, so on and so forth. So while this ship is on its last cruise, sort of thing, not cruise, but last voyage, it is taken over by a bunch of terrorists led by Tommy Lee Jones, the aim of which is to steal all the nuclear arsenal and weapons on the ship. However, they did not expect Steven Seagal's Casey Ryback to be on the ship, and he decides to fight back, and he does so by teaming up with Erika Eleniak in order to take out the terrorists. Right, what are my thoughts on Under Siege? Well, I've been really enjoying revisiting many of the 80s and 90s classic films from such, legendary action stars as Steven Seagal and Chuck Norris and Van Damme, so on and so forth. And I thought it would only make sense, really, if I covered what many regard as Steven Seagal's best film. It's certainly his most successful film at the box office. I personally wouldn't say it's my favourite Steven Seagal film, but it's probably the film that he made with almost like the biggest box office draw, I suppose. At the time, films like this were a dime a dozen in a sense of, everybody was trying to replicate the success from Die Hard. You had Die Hard on a Plane, Passenger 57. You had, Die Hard on a Train, which was the sequel to this. Essentially, it was Under Siege on a train. You had Die Hard on a ship with this, Under Siege. I mean, they just kept churning them out, and they're still doing it today to a large extent. It's a formula that has worked over and over again, and this was one of the most successful versions of that formula, Under Siege. It was a big box office hit for Steven Seagal, and it really sent his career into the stratosphere for a short period of time. Unfortunately, he never really capitalized on the success of this film, and many would say that the success went to his head and all that kind of stuff, and probably we would be right in saying that after this film, his career kind of, certainly at the box office, went on a slow decline. I think you would probably be hard pressed to argue against that. But this is a very, very entertaining film. I mean, it's made by Andrew Davis, who directed Seagal in Above the Law. He made The Fugitive, Code of Silence, a very, very talented and reliable director of this genre of films, action films. Very good quality director. He always has a good crew, like a production crew, many of the same actors, and all the crew he kind of brought with him to all of his films, which is why a lot of his films have a very similar feel and sound and look. They've all got kind of that, crisp look to them sort of thing, and they're using many, many of the same actors. You definitely know when you're watching an Andrew Davis film. And for a while, he was one of the go-to directors in the 80s and 90s, along with John McTiernan and others. So the film is really, really highly polished. The action scenes are really, really good. And Seagal is actually very good in the film. He's humorous when he needs to be humorous, sort of thing. He actually has a little bit of charisma here in this film. And when he's got a good director directing him, Seagal, and when he's got a director who's kind of strong enough to kind of push him and all that kind of stuff, you did occasionally get decent performances out of Seagal, and this was certainly one of them. But There's nobody going to argue that he is not massively overshadowed here by Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey, who steal every single scene that they're in. And when they're in a scene together, Gary Busey and Tommy Lee Jones, it's just a joy to watch. Tommy Lee Jones has an absolute blast playing the bad guy in this film. He's completely over the top. He's mad. But so is Gary Busey. They're both kind of playing the same character. They're both having an absolute scream here, playing the bad guys. And in actual fact, they get an awful lot of screen time. Certainly Tommy Lee Jones does. I think someone did the timings on this, even though Seagal is clearly the star of this film and it's his face on the poster and all that kind of stuff of it. I think he's only in it, when you time it, something like 40, 45 minutes or something like that. He's not in it as much as you might think, Seagal. But when he is in it, it's fun. You can see why Erika Eleniak was added to this film. I mean, it was the early 90s. You probably wouldn't want to see it these days, you know what I mean? But at the time, it was like the thing to kind of give the action star like a sidekick, you know, to give it like a buddy cop type feel. And while that's not exactly what's going on here with this film, there is a little bit of chemistry there between the two of them, and they do kind of have some good exchanges. But for the most part, unfortunately, she does kind of just play the damsel in distress. And then you've got, of course, the usual, you know, back at the base sort of thing. You've got the, you know, the naval officers and stuff surrounding the table, discussing what they're going to do, and on radio calls with Seagal. You know, it follows that kind of pattern and formula very, very closely. But as I've said, I do think this is a real highlight in Steven Seagal's career. It was a genuine box office success, very, very entertaining to watch. And it's one of those films that whenever it comes on TV, and I do have it on Blu-ray, but whenever it comes on TV on Film 4 or something like that, I'll generally always watch it, and I'm always entertained by this one. And I can't say that about every Steven Seagal film, obviously, the last 10 or 15 years. The majority of what he's put out there is practically unwatchable anyway. But like I say, this, to somebody who doesn't get Steven Seagal, who because he's kind of become a meme, he's become a laughing stock these days. And I do think if people don't really know his early work, Steven Seagal, probably you need to watch films like Under Siege, certainly, to see and get what it was all about. Because I mean, it's really good action, really nicely choreographed, brutal at times as well. The action in Under Siege. I remember in the UK, for years we had the like edited version, the tamed down version. On many Seagal films in the UK, a lot of them were very, very, you know, edited down and made much tamer, because some of the fighting in his films, you know, when he's snapping limbs and all this kind of stuff, was very, very brutal. So it was years until I kind of saw all of Seagal's film unedited sort of thing, because you can pretty much get them all now. So the full unedited version of this film is really, really brutal. Some of these scenes, some of the action scenes, you know, with him pushing people into saws and all this kind of stuff. Very brutal stuff. So I would strongly recommend, if you're one of these people like, I'm not interested in Steven Seagal, is a joke, well, you need to check back on some of the films that I've been reviewing recently, Steven Seagal, just as a real reminder of, actually, this guy was a real player. And this film is a prime example of why he was a real player on the action scene. So, yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of Under Siege. I will be back with loads more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.